Hey guys.
Jarrett.
Welcome.
Hi.
How's it going, Mark? Nice to meet you. I'm Jarrett.
This is a little token of Canada for you.
Thank you.
So,
Jarrett, you can do this for effect.
Just one more book, please.
okay.
So this is my daily commute.
Do you find you just want traffic?
Sometimes. If I don't leave the office by 4, it'll take me forever.
November 15th, 2008. It was like picture book boot camp. Jarrett demonstrated his illustrating and painting technique, and before long he had Lucy and Bayla trying out what they just learned, from prepping the illustration paper to mixing paint and shading to create 3 dimensions. I'm Ross-Blevis. On this edition of Just One More Book, Rockstars of Reading Part 8, Jarrett Krosoczka.
If you guys have been visiting illustrators, you may have seen some things that look like this. But this is what I show my publisher when I'm sending them a book idea. And what they do is they come back to me and they say, you know, we think it's great, but we think that there are some places where you can improve the story and where you can change some things around. And so I'll have to make a different version of this, so I'll have to revise it. And we spend almost, pretty close to a year, I would say 8 to 10 months or so, depending on the book, going back and forth and revising the story and just making sure everything is in really good shape. And when my publisher okays all of the sketches, I can go ahead and paint each picture. So see, that picture is from this page over here. So I believe what I have here is what became the final draft of Punk Farm. And so what I do is, since we've worked for so many months on these sketches, and there really is no way for me to redraw these sketches and have them look exactly the same. So what I do is I photocopy the sketches, and then I'd place the photocopy on an illustration board like this, and then trace the sketch so that the drawing would come up here. But today I'm going to skip that step because we're just going to have some fun fooling around. So what I do is I'll have a very light image of the drawing, and I take, this is called a conigram. This is called acrylic matte medium, and I never clean it off the tread before I close it, so it gets hardened up. So what color do you suppose this paint is?
Clear.
Yes, good work, it is clear. So what I do is I just take this and slap it on right over the drawing. And it gives me this.
The drawing is very messy.
Makes them very messy. And when even though it's clear, it has the same consistency as paint would, as acrylic paint would. And so it gives you this really neat texture. And that conchi crayon that you guys just drew with, you can see that the pigment is moving around.
Yeah.
With the paint. So if I did not put this on and I wanted to draw with the conchi crayon, that brown color would get mixed up with all of the colors I'd put on top of it. It would make everything look a little muddy. So this is burnt sienna. And what I do is just plop it down there on my palette. Take out another big brush. So I go into my brush drawer, which is right here. The brush drawer is just below the paint drawer.
That's logical.
It's logical. And I water down this burnt sienna.
Just with regular water?
Just with regular water. I cover the entire picture with the burnt sienna. And this is a technique that I learned in art school, in painting class, when we had to paint master copies. And so what we'd have to do is we'd have to take a famous painting, and we'd have to study up on how the painting was produced by the painter, and we had to make our own version of it. So when I was a student, I copied a painting by El Greco, and I copied a painting by John Singer Sargent. And I fell in love with John Singer Sargent and the way he put together his pictures, and the way he painted, just the way he used color and the way he created light. And with El Greco and all of the other painters that I studied, I learned that everyone was putting down a color underneath their work. And before that, anytime I tried to paint, I would always just try to paint on a white piece of paper. And the effects are never really as good, in my opinion, especially if you're dealing with these thick colors. If you're working with maybe thinner paints like watercolors, that might be something different, but this makes a world of difference. There's a special kind of red here. I don't know how to pronounce this. Can you pronounce that?
Where is it?
Right on the top, right there.
Winter syndrome red.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I've been using this color for years, and I still don't know how to pronounce it. But it makes for a great pink. Now, one thing to know when you're mixing colors, sometimes you just need one little bit of one color to get the color you would desire. So I want this to be kind of a lightish pink, but if I were to use all of this red, I need a lot more white. All I really need is that to get the pink that I'm looking for.
How long did it take you to figure that out?
Some time. I've wasted a lot of paint. I want there to be energy in my illustrations. You know, I really enjoy that, and that energy is going to come from this part right here. The energy is not just going to come from what the character's doing, but how I lay this color down. Now I'm going to mix up a much brighter pink. And this is going to be, this pink, I'm going to use this pink for where the light hits pig.
It's pink.
So that's a little bit too bright.
So do you automatically know where your light source is?
I really like that.
Yeah, I mean,
pink.
I usually guesstimate.
So in this particular case, your light source is coming almost from roughly where your lamp is. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'm thinking usually, especially with Punk Farm, I can play around with the light source with Punk Farm more, especially when they're on stage, because I can say, well, they're probably on stage somewhere. And when they're on stage, there's going to be all of this crazy lighting coming from every which direction.
Yeah.
So one important thing that I learned in college,
Wow, that's cool.
in art school, is that, we were painting. The teacher would have us paint like a lot of white sheets, and she would come up, and as we were painting, she'd critique what we were doing, and she'd give us advice, and she'd say, well, what color is that shadow? And I would say, well, that shadow was gray, and she'd say, no, that shadow was purple, or that shadow was blue. And she really helped me see that if you look at shadows, especially in something that's white, and if you look closely, you're going to see a lot of colors. You're going to see a lot of blues and a lot of purples. And that's why, I guess, going back to when you asked why I used that blue, blue is one of those reasons why I used that color to be the first color I put down, because it's going to be a darker, colder color, so it can look like that shadow. So now, so I put down the medium color. Now I'm going to mix a color that's going to be a much brighter pink, and I'm going to use this much more sparingly. And this is going to be thinking where the light hits him becomes the brightest. So probably on top of his snout.
Mm-hmm.
Where else might we see it, do you think?
Here.
And he, like on his arm right there?
What about
Like right here, like on his knees?
Maybe on his shoulder.
On his shoulder right there? I mean, your light source and your lights and shadows is a great way to help create drama in a piece, and also help move the person's eye along. So now here's something. So if the light's coming from right above him, right, so we figured out that these highlights are going to be coming up, on top of his head and stuff. But sometimes, say, look at my arm first, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
See how it's really light here?
Yeah.
and it's dark here, but there's a little bit of light on the bottom part.
Yeah.
And it's not very bright, but it's there. And if I take a little bit of light and put it here, it's going to make that piece, that arm, or whatever it is you're drawing, look that much more three-dimensional. When you're painting, and I learned this back in art school, is that you never actually use the color black. Like, I don't own a tube of black paint. And yes, good call. That's actually ink, and that's for another book that I'm working on. She's like, you've got black paint right there. No, this is actually ink, which I'm using for my Lunch Lady book. But so I don't have a tube of black acrylic paint that I use for my paintings. So what I'm going to do is excuse me for 1 sec, I'm going to open up this paint drawer. And I've discovered 2 colors that make a fantastic black. This color is called phthalo blue green shade. So it's blue, but it has a little bit of green in it. And the other color that I need, the other color that I need is cadmium red medium. And let's see if I can find it here. Now watch this. So now, that color that you mixed up for me,
It's black.
it's black. Look how black it is.
Whoa. How did you find that out?
That was something that I picked up when I was in art school.
What was it about El Greco that attracted you to his work in particular?
I think, well, the Greco one, I think I was attracted to the stylization of the faces and the hands. And then with the John Singer Sargent, I was attracted to just the way he would, like, say if there was light falling on a hand or a dress, he would have his base color, and then to create the light would just very confidently mix up whatever color that light was and put it on there. So, like, he wasn't particular about making sure everything was, especially when you're coming off of high school and you're a young art student, you sometimes think that everything might need to be gradated from one color to the other as like this perfect polished thing. And he was just kind of messy with it, and he was messy, but then if you pulled away, everything came together in a very solid form. And so he's one of the greatest influences on my work. And so it's like the Peanuts comic strips and the Calvin and Hobbes comic strips that I read as a kid and John Singer Sargent are both those things are what really informed me as an artist.